Unspoken Issues.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Unspoken Issues podcast. Before we get into today's episode, as you can see by the title of this episode, we'll be talking about X-Men 2099 today. So I found a news blurb in an issue of Wizard number 9 from May of 1992, about Marvel's line of upcoming 2099 titles. But things were a little different in May of 92. How different? Have a listen, and then soon after this, our episode will start.
The success of such future titles like Guardians of the Galaxy, X-Men, Days of Future Past, and the Once and Future Thor storyline have prompted Marvel Comics to release an entire line of future comics based on current characters. The 2093 line will not be based on any future previously seen in the Marvel Universe and will stand on its own. To be released this fall, this new series will start with 4 titles. The Marvel Universe of 2093 will be dramatically different from the Marvel Universe of today. What passes for superpowers in our world is nothing extraordinary in the future, so superheroes have to be that much more powerful. The first future title is Spider-Man 2093, to be released this September. This book will be the focal point for the Marvel 2093 line. Released as a part of Spidey's 30th anniversary year, Marvel's knack for marketing and promotional campaigns will make this book a hot newcomer. This new character may not have Todd McFarlane to boost its sales, but Marvel promises to make him as interesting as the original wall crawler, with a full century of changes. Dr. Doom has constantly been a hot villain over the years, and now has the distinction of being the first villain to get his own monthly title with Doom 2093. This new way of telling the story from the bad guy's point of view will probably have a major impact on the world of comics. If the Fantastic Four of 2093 exists is a question Marvel has not yet answered. Doom 2093 number 1 ships in October. The one character specifically designed for the 2093 line is Ravage. Stan Lee returns to writing a monthly title with Ravage 2093, a character which he created. More than any others, Ravage will investigate the future world in depth and will be released this November. Like the Punishers in the 30th century, the Punisher of 2093 is heavily armored. Looking more like Iron Man than the Punisher of today, Punisher 2093 must have the highest of the high-tech weapons to combat crime of the future. The last of the 4 introductory 2093 titles, Punisher 2093 number 1 will ship in December. Except for Stan Lee on Ravage, the creative teams for each title have yet to be announced.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Unspoken Issues podcast. That's right, you're back with us. We're talking 90s comics. We're so glad to have you. And I am not alone. No, I am not. Evan Bevins just destroyed me on Marvel Snap, and I almost kicked him off this podcast. But he has joined us to talk some 90s comics. Evan, are you ready to talk about X-Men 2099 tonight?
Yeah, I'm a little spent from that battle, but
all right.
I will push through.
Okay. I just gave away
it was pretty easy. Actually,
I gave away the winner, so I'm not going to do that in this next introduction because I edit all that out, by the way. For this, I
think they'll know.
Yeah, most people who voted on it probably know who won. But anyway,
those people who see the title of the podcast will probably know who won.
You probably got a point there. Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? We're talking X-Men 2099 tonight. Chris, this was your baby, though. This was what you thought about this. Although we kind of kicked the idea around for this. This is a rematch, right? Like X-Men 2099 came back. We've had this in a poll before, right?
Right. I just threw 4 losers from previous polls together in a mismatch of different titles. So this one, X-Men 2099, lost in a poll of all the relevant 2099 titles from a few years ago.
Notice how he's not
Ravage 2099 reference in this issue. It will be mentioned.
I
believe Doom and Punisher may be tied, because I think we did both of those. Okay. And then Spider-Man 2099 and X-Men 2099 lost. So I brought X-Men back for this poll. I think Danger Girl was in there, a couple others, but yeah, X-Men won out.
I'll break it down here for you. So we had break it down for him. Danger Girl number 1, Robin number 8, Can I ask why were we trying to do that one?
Robin number 8 was up against a Nightwing issue. I forget which number, but it won. And it was because they were both... It was a Nightwing issue with Robin guest starring and a Robin issue with Nightwing as a guest star.
Got it.
I don't really remember exactly why we were using those characters, or maybe just because I wanted to talk about Nightwing. I don't really remember. But
then we had X-Men 2099 and Fantastic Force. So as we break it down from fourth to first, Fantastic Force comes in. Now, we threw this out on the Unspoken Decade Facebook, and we also threw this onto the Source Material Twitter. We got fairly decent amount of votes, total of, I think, it was like in the 80s. Fantastic Force, though, only got 7 votes. Coming in on
And most of those came on Twitter.
Yeah, there was about 3, so about half. And then the other 4, I think there's 5% of the 72 votes went to Fantastic Force from Facebook. So, yeah, it was about split. But, yeah, Fantastic Force number 1. Robin number 8 got 15 votes total. Fantastic Force did beat Robin in Twitter, but did not fare so well in Facebook land.
And I just realized I'm pretty sure 2 of those Fantastic Force votes were from me.
Really? Snap Material get in there and Evan Bevins get in there too?
No,
Nice.
on Facebook and on Twitter.
Gotcha. Okay. All right.
Man, that's a good idea, though. Could have gotten 3.
Boy.
yeah, you could really beef it up.
And then Danger Girl number 1 came in with 26 votes, but was 7 shy of coming in first place when X-Men 29 pulled in 33 votes. So, yeah, we're going to be talking about X-Men 2099 tonight. And, let's go ahead and just go around the table here, starting with Evan. As far as like the 2099 titles, were you excited back in the 90s when these were getting ready to drop?
I was excited back in the 90s when these were getting ready to drop. I got Spider-Man, and I know I got that one, and followed it until I couldn't find issue 7. 15 years later, I finally got issue 7, but I'd kind of lost the plot at that point. Bought Doom occasionally, didn't know anything about Ravage, apparently didn't realize it was being written by Stan Lee, didn't know what I was missing. And then the Punisher, Punisher. Yeah.
It's going to be like that. Okay. Yeah, it's the Punisher.
Pretty much. But I remember I got the first issue of X-Men 29. I think I got a few issues of it, but it kind of fell by the wayside, the victim of a limited budget.
I understand. I was probably more hindered by the budget as well. I also didn't want to... I knew that these titles would probably be pretty far detached to what I was already used to. This is 100 years into the future. Well, all the people that I'm following right now are going to be dead and gone. So I'm going to have to, not only am I getting into a new title, it's almost like I'm getting into a new universe. It's almost like I'm starting fresh, and I didn't want to do that.
Maybe Old Man Wolverine would show up, but that would be the only relevant character from the 90s that might pop up.
I heard Thor was going to show up.
Yeah. So, me personally, I was not trying to talk my parents into letting me get in any 2099 titles. So, how about you, Chris?
I was excited about the 2099 launch, although I think the only number 1s I got were Spider-Man and maybe Ravage because of Stan Lee. I don't really remember. And I kept up with Spider-Man 2099 for a handful of issues. When X-Men 2099 launched, I was excited about that because I loved X-Men, and I was a whole new, cast of mutants to follow. Right. So I jumped on that series and read 5-6 issues, but much like you were saying, the budget wasn't really there for me to stick with, to just keep getting everything that I wanted, so it kind of fell by the wayside. I know I made it through the crossover, the 2099 crossover with all those titles. I think there were 5 at that point. It was before anything else past X-Men 2099 had come out. But yeah, pretty much after that, I was kind of done with 2099 for the rest of the 90s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If I would have known what I do now and had a better knowledge of who artists were and writers, I will say that the writer on this, John Francis Moore, I didn't know a whole lot about what he had written in the past. Actually, when you look at Mike's Amazing World of Comics, he's not got a very huge resume prior to getting on to X-Men 2099.
He was also the Doom 2099 writer, wasn't he?
Exactly. Yeah. What ends up happening is John Francis Moore gets on this title. He's actually tied to 2 2099 books, and he goes through all 35 issues. So this series only has 35 issues. So that's an accomplishment, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But he's
and
also...
I think Ron Lim is pretty consistently the artist through the whole series, too.
Yeah, that's the other thing I was going to kind of say is that when you look at this cover, which we're going to talk about the cover here in a second, but when you look at the cover and you look at the names that are on the cover, Ron Lim, I am a huge fan of Ron Lim's art. Silver Surfer, right?
Yeah.
And that's not going out on a limb.
Oh, no, it's not. No, it's not. And Adam Kubert. Adam Kubert inking the Kubert. I think in 93, we'll look at Mike's Amazing World of Comics. Adam is going to be staying on this for just a little bit, and then he hits Wolverine. And his art starts to get noticed. When you look at his career, he was an inker for a little while. He was a penciler. He was a letterer. So he's pretty versatile when it comes to working on these comics. Back to John Francis Moore real quick. You mentioned Doom 2099. So he writes the first 25 issues of that. So guess who comes on in December of 94 to write Doom 2099 after John Francis Moore comes off of it?
Oh, I know. Tell
me.
Warren Ellis.
That's right. Warren Ellis comes on.
Which only the Warren Ellis issues are available on Marvel Unlimited. So.
Oh, really?
Interesting.
I think maybe those issues, Warren Ellis's issues, and the crossover issue, whatever issue of it that was of Doom, that was part of the 2099 crossover. But yeah,
the crossover issue is the only issue of Ravage available,
and Punisher too. I think is the only one.
That's sad. Well, let's talk about. I mean, this front cover. I see Ron Lim, Adam Kubert. 93. What else is significant about this cover? You guys thought it was such a travesty to read this thing in a digital form. So please explain, Chris Armstrong, why should we read this physically?
I'll leave that to Evan because he brought it up in the chat.
All right.
But I will say, Ron Lim, I really like his art. He was obviously took over for Perez in Infinity Gauntlet and did the sequels in that series. And I think this was the first thing besides that I really knew him from. I know he had done Captain America and Silver Surfer before that, but then I was excited. He was one of the reasons I was excited about this book, besides just that it was X-Men, because I did like his art a lot. And I wasn't as familiar with Adam Kubert as, I didn't keep up with who was inking stuff. That didn't matter to me so much.
Right, same.
But Adam Kubert, I'm pretty sure he was the penciler on Spirits of Vengeance by this time. So he was probably doing some inking on different things while he was also still penciling. Honestly, the best Ron Lim art outside of maybe most of that Infinity trilogy stuff, I think is probably in these issues when he's being inked by Adam Kubert, who really, you can kind of see that Adam Kubert, there's some similarities in the faces and some of the details that you would maybe see in some of his pencils in other books. But yeah, I like the art in this quite a bit. But anyway, I'll let Evan talk about the cover.
Yeah, you got the floor, Evan.
I'm sending Jesse the comparison here so he'll know. The 2099 number ones, at least the initial ones, I don't think they were still doing it by the time we got 2099 Unlimited, but they had this foil border, like this implying high-tech machinery. Spider-Man's was red. Doom's was silver to match his armor. Ravage's was gold. Yeah, the Punisher had some color. I don't know. And then
it's going to be like this whole podcast, isn't it? No more mentions of the Punisher.
Yeah, I mean, Ravage really is the star. But so, yeah, they had this cool, purple foil border on the X-Men issue. I hadn't planned on knowing the Punisher thing, but your reaction, it's like if Martyr jumps to a new location and loses it for you in Snap.
It is not even similar to that reaction.
Oh,
but
okay. Chris has just corrected me that it was blue.
Blue. Okay, gotcha.
Okay, well, I swear I've seen it purple in like a physical copy, but maybe that was a second printing, or maybe I'm just wrong.
I've got the trade paperback that has the first, 10 issues or so, and it's that purple cover. It doesn't have a foil on it, but it's the purple. Yeah. Whereas the one on Marvel Unlimited is just like a white border with,
So clearly we've learned that Chris should have been describing this all along. I don't know. Maybe I saw the purple foil border in that movie Shazam with Sinbad.
Sinbad, yes. I remember that. I know exactly.
Perhaps it was in one of those alternate universes on Fringe.
There you go.
Could be. But nevertheless, that was like, I don't know. When I think of 2099, I think of that Spider-Man costume and the foil borders. And I don't know, just that white one, it looks like something from an adult coloring book. I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, 93, we are in the heart of the gimmick era. Clearly.
Yeah.
I think gimmicks will start kind of fading away a few more years after this. But yeah, they knew what they were doing with this. I mean, this is a way to get the attention of the person that's walking by the comic book shelf and saying, oh, X-Men 2099. This was brought up in the interview with John Francis Moore. He talks about how speculation was such a big thing in the 90s. And if there was a number one issue of something, you can bet the comic book store owners were going to be trying to bank on that thing selling. And he kind of talks about that in his interview that he did. He says he more emphasizes the importance of readers enjoying and engaging with the stories rather than merely buying comics as investment items. He expresses a hope that X-Men 2099 will be valued for its narrative and characters rather than just its collectible aspects. So he clearly, I mean, obviously, that was a commentary on what was going on with the market at that point. To kind of give you an idea of John Francis Moore here real quick. I keep going back to this guy, but this is the guy I did the research on. Previous work experience. Began his career as an artist to Howard Chaykin on The Shadow and Times 2. He then moved on to become the artist and later a writer for American Flag. He also has ties to, looks like, worked on various comic book titles, including Superboy for DC, which tied into the TV show of the same name. His work on Superboy allowed him creative freedom to explore characters like Bizarro and the Pseudo Legion. He wrote for The Flash, and we're talking John Wesley Shipp Flash. He enjoyed the creative process and opportunity to work on high-quality production, despite the show's tough competition. More valued experience. He also worked on The Human Target, Palace Guard, and tell me if this rings a bell for you guys. He wrote an episode for Viper.
I remember Viper.
Nice.
Yeah, Viper, the
sports car.
So anyway, we talked about the cover. We talked about the writer. Do you guys have anything else you want us to talk about here before I get into the synopsis?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Let's go.
Right. In the Nevada desert, at a facility known as the Nuevo Sol Arcology, Timothy Fitzgerald arrives at a mysterious gathering. After presenting his invitation, Timothy steps into an active rave where he encounters Tina, also known as Serpentina, who inquires if he is a mutant. Despite his denial, Tina welcomes him, explaining that the residents are all mutants and outcasts. Meanwhile, the mutant junk pile questions Shakti about their leader. I'm going to go with Xion. What do you think?
When I was a kid, I just said Exian. I don't think that's correct. I'm going to say Xion.
John? Okay, because I know that rolls. Yeah, I'm unfortunately Appalachian. But here we go. We're going to go with Jean. And I mean, yeah, works for me. All right, it's easy. The mutant junk pile questions Shakti about their leader Jean's whereabouts. In Las Vegas, Noah Singe, head of the Nevada Syndicate, confronts Jean. Actually, Jean confronts him, and he demands an end to Noah's human trafficking, threatening war if it continues. At a Singe casino, a mutant terrorist named Bloodhawk awaits public execution on a game show-esque type thing. Noah's children, Lytton and Desdemona, are involved in the execution plans. However, mutants Crystalline and Meanstreak stage a daring rescue, freeing Bloodhawk, who refuses afterwards to join them at Nuevo Sol and departs abruptly after turning into a big scary dragon guy.
Clearly, he hadn't looked at the cover.
No, he didn't. Because we've got a few people on there that
could save us some time.
Right, yeah. Later, Lytton discovers his father's decaying corpse atop a horse in their stables and immediately blames Jean. Jean, meeting with Shakti, expresses satisfaction at Timothy's arrival at Nuevo Sol and prepares to address the crowd, unaware of an intruder. As he urges the crowd to fight for a better future, Timothy spots the armed man in the balcony. Channeling his electrical powers, Timothy attempts to thwart the assassin, but only partially succeeds. Jean is shot and critically injured. Chaos erupts as Singe's enforcers arrive to arrest everyone. I thought this was a crime syndicate at first. I guess not. I guess they're the police.
Yeah, the government doesn't do a lot in 2099.
Apparently not.
It's mega corporations, and if there aren't any mega corporations in Las Vegas, then whoever has the biggest casinos in charge.
So Singe and the Enforcers arrive to arrest everyone. Crystalline fights back, allowing the crowd to disperse. Timothy and Tina escape with the group, retreating below, taking the injured Jean with them. Shakti realizes Junk Pile's betrayal, and as Jean is prepared for transport, he invites a shocked Timothy to join his X-Men. And that is where we leave the end of issue 1.
X-Men?
Evan, yeah, X-Men?
He didn't look at the cover either.
Right.
You got to do your homework, people.
No kidding. So, Evan, I'm going to throw it to you here real quick. I mean, on our cover, we have, I assume, who are going to be the X-Men of 2099. Do you think you could do a rundown of who was on the cover and their power sets?
Maybe.
Give
I
it a
can tell
shot.
you I only remembered 2 people from the cover, which was, well, really just Bloodhawk.
Yeah.
And then I remember Tim's the guy on the front who doesn't he eventually go by the code name of Skullfire?
Skullfire. Yep.
Yeah. So, okay, like Serpentina, I totally forgot about. I think Jean's in the desert get up, and he has like a decaying touch. So we saw that when he met with Singe and like destroyed a conveniently placed brick wall. So that's one of the really cool aspects of this issue is you're kind of like, I think at that point I assumed he hadn't done it just because Heroes didn't do that, but it's kind of a mystery. You know, it's not only are they blaming him for Singe's death, but the reader's kind of like, well,
He might have.
circumstantial evidence.
Right.
So yeah, now we've got. I may have to have Chris, since he's already demonstrated he knows more about the real world ramifications and color choices on the cover. Mean Streak is a speedster. Looks a little like Future Gambit. Then again, so does Skullfire. He's a speedster. Shakti is the one to Skullfire's left. She's a telepath, but she does a little bit more than that. And I should know this because she has actually shown up in current X-Men comics.
Oh, really?
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah, she went back in time and popped up on Krakoa for reasons. She has telepathic powers, but she's got something else that has to do with, like, I don't know if it's detecting mutants or, like, she can affect mutants on the genetic level. It's not just simple telepathy.
Now, Shakti, I just pulled up Marvel Wiki, so, I'm not going to say that I know exactly what I'm talking about, but there's mention throughout the issue of somebody named Cerebra, and I think that's her.
That is her. That's what she goes by nowadays.
Right.
So.
Gotcha. Okay.
So then we have Crystalline up there above Mean Streak, and she can generate the crystal structures. Serpentina, I totally forgot about. She appears to just have stretchy arms.
Yeah.
Metalhead is one that did stick with me. He can basically absorb the properties of any metal he comes in contact with. So he's got a lot of bracelets and jewelry and stuff, I guess, to facilitate that. And then you got Bloodhawk, who, whenever anybody says X-Men 2099, Bloodhawk pops into my head. I don't know for sure, but I dare say that before it came out, Bloodhawk was everybody's favorite member of X-Men 2099.
He's the most like Wolverine, so he's got to be.
He's the 90s-est guy on there.
Yeah.
For sure. Thanks for setting me up and then having the wiki handy to show me where I was wrong.
Hey, I got your back. Well, I was trying to figure out, actually, when you were talking, I was like, who is Cerebra? And yeah, I figured that out while we were on the episode. So that is actually, I thought Cerebra was separate from Shakti for a while. So
yeah,
not the case.
Because it took me a minute she popped up in one of the X-Men comics and I'm like, who's this Cerebra? And then they referred to her as Shakti and said something about time travel. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, our cover has everybody obviously trying to attempt to use their powers. Skullfire is not using his powers at all, other than when I guess he does. He does do that to stop the assassin, but he doesn't look like the guy that's on the cover of this comic book.
Right, he didn't have the costume yet or the face.
Exactly.
I guess he has
that's
face
before
paint.
he discovered old vintage videos of Kiss.
I'll take it. Chris, do you have a favorite member of the X-Men 2099 here before we get into talking about this?
Yeah, it would have been Bloodhawk back then. I think now I kind of like Metalhead. That's an interesting power set where it's almost an absorbing man type thing, with metal. And it's cool that he's got all the metals he needs on him that he can. And they also he puts it to good use as a futuristic DJ.
Yeah.
That's the other thing I remember specifically from this issue. Bloodhawk on the cover and Metalhead using his powers to make music.
That's great. I'm starting to realize that I'm a fan of like the big bruisers. I'm a fan of Pitt. I'm a fan of Impact. I'm a fan of Maul. And I guess, I'm going to be right there with you. Now I'm a fan of Metalhead because I think that, I loved seeing him in this comic. I didn't talk about him much in the synopsis at all, but, there's a point where the Syndicate's coming in there to arrest everybody and he turns into adamantium and he's like, best of luck. You're not going to hurt me any, but when I get near you, I'm going to hurt you. It's going to happen. Evan, you got a favorite?
Bloodhawk's the most memorable to me. He's synonymous with X-Men 2099 to me. I was looking at the covers. I think I got up to the third issue, but I do not remember a whole lot. They are all on Unlimited, though, so that's call one to me. I think Skullfire might have piqued my interest, possibly because he was the point of view character or whatever, and his power did look pretty cool then. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe I appreciated the literalness of his code name.
All right, well, stick with it, Evan. What do you think of What do you think of our first issue here?
It's a great setup. It feels like the X-Men without, hey, here's a bunch of people squatting in the rundown mansion of Charles Xavier in Westchester, and here's Skippy Xavier, his great-grandson, and there's not any obvious connections to the original characters, but it's very much X-Men in spirit, so it does a good job of connecting with it and having a clean slate all at once. Like I said, the question of whether Jean really did that, because, we don't know these guys.
Right.
Back then, unlike the present day, the X-Men didn't just indiscriminately murder their enemies. Did he do it? And, then there's a little bit of a twist as far as, hey, the guy that draws your attention on the cover isn't even going to join the team. What the heck?
Right.
So, yeah, you get an interesting power set, and it's not just a bunch of clones of the X-Men. And, you got the big bruiser you talked about is a musician. He'll defend his friends, but he's not the hothead going around punching everybody. Junk Pile always made an impression on me, part because I have a hero click of him.
Oh, really?
They had a 2099 hero click set that was, I don't know, it was one of those specialized ones that I was like, I'm not going to pay that much just for six figures, but I found them like in, singles and stuff. So I had Junk Pile, I had Ghost Rider 2099, and I did get a Spider-Man 2099. But I haven't read a lot of 2099, but it's just, I don't know, it was like kind of this fully realized world of Marvel, and I was just always glad 2099 existed.
Fair enough. I agree. When I got into this issue, I'm pretty sure, at least 4 issues of this series. I've read 0 of them until earlier today. So it's one of those things where they're not really, in my opinion, hard to find.
Which one did you read?
I read this one.
Who ever heard of somebody reading the wrong issue for it?
Tune in to the last episode Evan Bevins was on. As far as the story goes, let me just start there. As far as the story goes, I'm going to echo what you're saying. We got a whole new set of characters here. They all got strange, different powers. And the issue does exactly what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to give you an idea of who these characters are, what kind of powers they have, and what the drama is going to be, with Jean getting shot and it's not like everybody's going around calling themselves the X-Men. We don't find out about until the very end of the issue that it sounds like Jean's going to put together or already has a band ready, and he wants Timothy to join them. So that's pretty cool. I think it's mentioned in this issue, but one of the things that John Francis Moore talked about in his interview was the fact that, a lot of the other 2099 titles are going to be mentioning mega corporations all the time. There's always these big mega corporations, and it sounded like what he was saying was that he's going to be this book is going to be kind of different from that, where they're out there, but we're not going to have that influence here in the X-Men universe, according to him.
There was a mention of Alchemax, and of course there was the one guy at the casino who incorrectly called mutants mutroids. Those are the people that Ravage has to deal with.
Okay. I wondered what that was, if that was a reference to something. Okay. All right. And Ravage, folks. I don't want to continue to give myself stuff to edit out. Junk Pile being, I'm assuming Junk Pile is a traitor here because he straight up saw that guy and said, nah, everything checks out. So I'm going to assume if anybody else, if you guys have read on.
He's a traitor.
He's a traitor. And
I had in my notes, he was giving me Cypher vibes, and not Cypher from the X-Men, Cypher from the Matrix.
Yeah.
You know, like it's like, yeah, okay, we were friends, but I'm smarter than you guys. I know what's really going on here. Just knock off this idealistic BS.
But yeah, like I said, I mean, it's perfect for an introduction issue. I think it did its job, and you can't complain about this art at all. Ron Lim is phenomenal, in my opinion, probably in my top 10. I've always appreciated what he could do when it comes to pencils. And yeah, Adam Kubert just following him up is nothing to sneeze at. So yeah, it's really engaging when it comes to the art. So yeah, I mean, that's really all I got to say about it. I think we have some allusions to the X-Men, like the assassin's wearing ruby colored shades. And the first time you see the assassin, there's a guy that's dressed like Cyclops in the crowd.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting that he was wearing ruby colored shades and this was the assassin that was going up there. But clearly they didn't feel like that was important to go out through the rest of the issue.
I think it was more of an Easter egg than anything else. But yeah, I looked at that. I'm like, so there's Cyclops in the crowd and
yeah,
Cyclops
what's going on
behind him?
What is going on? All right, Chris, what are your thoughts here, man?
I also, like this as a jumping off point for the series. That kind of set everything up, gave you a nice cliffhanger at the end. Specifically, Bloodhawk. I do think he was probably my favorite, but when I was younger. But that was purely because he looked cool.
Oh, yeah. He looks awesome.
He's essentially like an eco-terrorist type with a noble goal, a noble cause, and everything. He's rescued in this issue by the X-Men and has no time for them at all. He doesn't care about their cause or anything. He's quick to get out of there. Not as likable of a character necessarily, but very cool looking. I love the transformation. It shows him going from basically human form into the full Bloodhawk with the wings and the giant claws and everything. It was interesting that there are allusions to like what's happened since the early, when this was published in 93. I mean, it looks like the X-Men, Professor X and the X-Men failed. Like their mutants have it worse here than they did in the 90s, in the 1990s, I should say, seemingly. And, John, I've been saying...
You say what you want to.
I've been saying Zion in my head. So
that sounds good to me.
When he makes his speech to the crowd or whatever, he references the Great Purge, where an entire generation of mutants were wiped out. And if you're reading this in the aughts, boy, that sounds a lot like No More Mutants.
Yeah, right.
Happened in what was that miniseries? House of M. Yeah.
House of M.
And he also references Xavier and Magneto, or Xavier and Magnus. But then he also mentions some mutants, Del Ruiz and Zeo, so who I guess were other mutant leaders over the last 100 years or so.
I wonder if they ever showed up, if they were ever referenced.
Looking it up.
Yeah, I don't know if they get more references in the later issues or not, but it's cool that gives more history and backstory to the mutant cause over the last 100 years.
Yeah, there's a villain that shows up in issue 26 by the name of Arcadian, and apparently he was one of it says the mutant known as Arcadian battled Del Ruiz's X-Men in his lifetime. So, I mean, but I think it's just a situation where they're adding more lore in this book. It doesn't look like Del Ruiz has any type of wiki, as far as I could tell. But yeah, I have no idea. So
there's a few, and there is a character I think I'm just doing like you, just looking it up now. But I think there's a character in X-Men 2099 later issues named Zhao.
Oh, okay, all right. What did we say Zion's power set is?
He has.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, he has a hand. His right hand, I think. I should say his left hand has the power to decay or break down matter, I guess. And then I don't think it's revealed in this issue, but I think later, maybe it's after he heals from his assassination attempt here. I think his left hand or his opposite hand has like healing powers or something. I could be imagining that, but that's how I kind of remember it from back then.
Okay.
The assassination attempt also kind of corresponds, almost with Xavier being assassinated or attempted assassination and executioner song, maybe a year before this came out. That was all the rage in dealing with mutant leaders, I guess, in the 90s.
Right.
Well, you'd think it'd be easier to find techno-organic bullets in 2099, but...
Did you guys want to go ahead and pick a panel?
You guys go ahead.
All right. Let me go. I'll go first. And I am picking Metalhead turning in an adamantium. just because earlier in the issue, you see him, he's like gold. And you get to see him turn into this shiny, silvery, almost Silver Surfer-esque body, which, lo and behold, Ron Lim drawing somebody that looks silver. But yeah, I mean, he looks pretty awesome. So I'll go with Metalhead right there, showing everybody what he's made of at that point.
I'll take it from you, Chris, but I got to go with the Bloodhawk transformation.
Oh,
It's pretty strong.
Weird shirtless bald dude, and suddenly, I think even before that, I figured out who he was because, even if you just looked at the cover, I think it's pretty obvious which guy goes by Bloodhawk.
Right.
But yeah, that's the most striking image in there to me.
Okay. All right, Chris, you're up, man.
I'm going to go with the Skullfire powering up before blasting off against the assassin, where you basically just see the skeletal structure underneath the body of Skullfire, which is pretty cool. My honorable mention would be Golden Metalhead putting up the dance moves and doing his DJ shtick.
Yeah.
That was one of my backups because I remember that panel from reading it the first time. So
that look on his face is pretty striking.
Yeah, that one stuck with me too.
Just taking a look to see Ron Lim. I mean, Ron Lim's a power hitter in my opinion when it comes to penciling.
I think there may be villain issues, but I think he's on the book till it ends.
Oh wow!
Let me see, because
I think you're right.
Issues are here.
He might. Okay, so let me tell you what I'm seeing. X-Men 2099 number 31. And I'm pretty sure this goes to 35. 2099 number 31 is 1996, February of 96. He has a Spider-Man 2099 issue that he does, number 44, a couple months later, and then he's off to DC after that. He's doing Sovereign 7, and it looks like comes back about a year later and does a couple issues of Fantastic Four. But I think you're right, though. I mean, it was pretty consistent, if not all the issues up to issue 31. I'm curious who takes over as the artist. Let's look.
Looks like Jan Dursema, or I don't know how to pronounce that guy's name. He did a lot of X-Men, or a lot of Star Wars stuff in the 90s, I think.
Right. 35 issues is nothing to sneeze at. That's a pretty solid run, man.
Dynasty these days.
No kidding.
And then another character besides Cerebra that has popped up, I think, as I was looking early on, one of the villains they end up fighting is a guy called Brimstone Love.
Okay.
And he showed up in the Marauders title a couple years ago.
Brimstone Love. Time travel shenanigans or early iteration?
I don't think it was time travel. I'm trying to remember. Marauders wasn't one of my favorite titles. I think they spent an issue or two of him just torturing Dakin, because what do you do with a character who heals? You just hurt him as bad as you possibly can and as graphically as you can. I think he showed up after I stopped getting it, so I just read about it after the fact. Like, hey, this guy from 2099 showed up, but I don't think they really specified whether it was time travel or if he was just long-lived, but just that he became part of the X-Men's newer Rogues Gallery.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I was just taking a look. I don't know if... Yeah, they got a Brimstone Love for Earth 928, which is the 2099 universe, right?
I believe so, yeah.
I believe so. I'm going to double check that and make sure. They got Spider-Man on? No. I don't know what Earth 928 members, and it's not all... He must be alternate reality or something like that.
Well, I just looked real quick. Fandom lists another denizen of Earth 928 as Ravage.
Okay. So then that's got to be the 2099 universe, right? Yeah. Yeah, and then there's a 616 Brimstone Love as well. Nothing is known of Brimstone Love's early life, but at some point he founded the Theater of Pain, a sadistic group that profited from human misery in response to the founding of the sovereign mutant nation of Krakoa. Huh. Interesting.
Theater of Pain is a group that the X-Men 2099 fight as well. I saw them on the cover of one of the issues.
Theater of Pain. Another solid album. Band title, a band name right there. There you go. All right. Well, I mean, we've done it. This is X-Men 2099. Any other notes? Anything else before we wrap things up?
I think I'm good.
All right.
What I need to say.
We said what we needed to say. You guys picked it. We covered it. X-Men 2099 number 1. Did we pique your interest? Will you go out and seek more? I don't think you should have much of a problem finding these things. I don't believe they're too expensive. Either of you guys seen high price tags on any of these issues?
I would guess maybe some of the later ones are slightly more expensive because I'll bet that the print runs were lower, but I'm sure they're not outrageous at all.
Right.
And I could be completely wrong.
I've seen X-Men 2099 #1, even though it looked purple to me, a few times in bargain bins recently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That wasn't sarcasm. I really, really thought it was purple.
Let's go ahead and we'll get into plugs here. Chris Armstrong, I'll let you go first here, buddy. What's going on over on Small Screeners and any other podcasts you got going on?
Yeah, I've got another podcast I do with my buddy AJ called Small Screeners, where we talk about direct-to-video and made-for-TV movies. Actually recording later tonight on Duel, Steven Spielberg's first movie. It was a made-for-TV movie in the 70s that I'd never seen. I watched it earlier today. Pretty damn good. So that'll be coming up maybe by the time this is out. Not sure. It'll be out soon. And then you can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at BrodyMan34. And I've got a Letterboxd where I do rate movies and stuff. Disco Shrew is the name on there.
Okay. Very cool. Evan Bevins, tell them about Asterisk 51 and anything else you're doing.
At asterisk51.blogspot.com. I am making my way through the amalgam titles, the Marvel DC mashups, as well as through the stacks of movies I've acquired at Dollar Tree, #Dollar Tree Cinema, and the stacks of Free Comic Book Day and other free comics that I've grabbed and been meaning to get around to read. Well, now when I read them, I write about them. So you can look that up on X under #Free Comic Friday. And then as far as podcasting, Jesse and I do Snap Material on the Source Material channel, which is dedicated to the Marvel mobile game, Marvel Snap. Sometimes we play live on YouTube, and sometimes Jesse gets a little worked up. But it's a good time.
Yes, it is.
And let's see. I also recently did an episode of Comic Strip with the one and only Mark Radulich on Bulletproof Monk, the comic, and Bulletproof Monk, the movie, which definitely share a title.
That's about it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, for myself, hey, you can check out the Source Material Comics podcast where we discuss comics of any era. If you're interested, go seek out w2mnet.com. Should be able to find links to any of our shows over there. But just search Source Material on any podcatcher that you have. Should be able to find the feed. We have also this show here, Unspoken Issues. We're at over 100 episodes where we're just talking 90s comics, and we have a lot of fun doing that. So with that being said, we are getting out of here. That's Chris. That's Evan. I'm Jesse. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. Unspoken Issues is part of the UnspokenDecade.com, the home for 90s comics, blogs, and podcasts. Unspoken Issues also has a Facebook group you can join if you are interested. Just search the Unspoken Issues podcast and request to join. All of this would not be possible without w2mnet.com, so make sure to seek them out for more podcasts. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please feel free to share, and we look forward to entertaining you again soon.